ARD is now revealing the absolute Bitcoin disaster. It's about the 50,000 Bitcoin that Germany sold, or rather, the state of Saxony. And now it says here that the assets are currently frozen. But that's nothing new. Everyone already knows that. But that the assets might not be released for up to 4 years. And now here too. It's not available for the federal budget or for planning in Saxony. That means they sold the Bitcoin, made an emergency sale. When you say, hey, we need to make money fast, because Bitcoin is too volatile. We need to get the money out quickly. Now the money is stuck. Can't be moved. And here, legal matters need to be clarified first. And until that happens, could take up to 4 years. An audio case has also been released from ARD that we're looking at something that's extremely explosive. We also have more exciting movements, because Russia seems to be buying here. More. At least that's what they say about Bitcoin. We're looking into what's behind it. Also, there's some exciting news here about the Bitcoin reserves in the US and what's next, because we don't have many days left until Donald Trump is inaugurated as the new president in the US. But first, let's take a look at the Germany Bitcoin shock, because we don't have many days left until Donald Trump is inaugurated as the new president in the U.S. But first, let's take a look at the Germany Bitcoin shock. Just a day ago, I did the interview here with Max Kaiser, where he was really shocked, where he completely lost it. Said that it's a shame, the political class in Germany. How can you do something like that? They sell the Bitcoin, you can't just simply get rid of it. He actually said back then, sausages, and stuff like that. You also need Bitcoin here, and he just hinted at it here. That in Germany, of course, there are a lot of sausages. And yeah, that's nice and all, but you also need a Bitcoin reserve. Germany is selling while all the other nations are buying right now. Here in El Salvador, they're also buying 1 Bitcoin every day. Now America might be buying while Germany has sold. And now you can't even do anything with the money. But check it out for yourselves. This explosive clip was actually shared here on the ARD homepage. I'm going to play it for you in full length because it's extremely explosive.
The sale of the 50,000 seized bitcoins brought in almost 2.7 billion euros for the Free State of Saxony last year. Seized bitcoins brought in by the Free State of Saxony last year. Since then, the amount has been sitting in a custody account of the State Justice Fund on ice. The money is about illegal profits from the operation of the streaming portal Movie 2K. The accused voluntarily handed over the cryptocurrency to the public prosecutor's office after his arrest at the beginning of last year. Through the platform where you could watch movies online, almost 900,000 copies were illegally distributed until 2013. Copies of movies and TV series were distributed illegally. In April, investigators from Dresden filed charges against the operators. What's happening with the money now is currently being clarified legally, but it could still take years for this case to reach a conclusion. In July, the Free State announced that the proceeds would initially not represent any additional revenue in the state budget. So far, the Saxon finance minister had at least allowed the interest gains to flow into the state treasury. There's no information on how high those were. Now, a reassessment by the Ministry of Justice shows that he shouldn't have done that. In the future, the interest on the custody account is also supposed to stay there. The new Saxon cabinet will therefore address the emergency sale of bitcoins during its first meeting of the year, according to information from the Saxon newspaper. The emergency sale of bitcoins will be addressed with the updated risk assessment from the Ministry of Justice, which has the approval of the Saxon Cabinet Commission. If the cabinet agrees to the concerns, the interest gains will no longer be available to the Free State for the time being.
Well, that's quite a bombshell. Not only is the money now frozen, could still take several years, and now the interest earnings might also be collected here. That you can't really use it, because you could now say, okay, you have this many millions in assets, and now you can at least use the interest earnings for that. Use it to basically get things going again in Saxony. But to use it for something, to build bike paths here, or whatever, But the interest income now apparently also flows into the same account. That means you can't take the interest earnings away either. I actually said before that 4 years stands out to me. But here in the report, they're only talking about several years. So I don't know where I got the 4 years from. Whether I read that in the comments or I have no idea where I got it from. Somehow I had 4 years in my head, no idea. They're talking about several years here. But several years includes 4 years. So it could take 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. But several years means at least 2 years. Maybe it's not 4 years after all, maybe it's just 2 years. But that would already be a shock. Then there was basically so much panic created. They really did it in a very, very short time. I think it was just a few weeks ago when they sold off all the Bitcoin here. And now they're basically just chilling here. And they just say, hey, okay, now we're just going to chill for a bit, 2-3 years. Let's see how this turns out. We're just going to let the money sit there and collect dust. You don't even get any interest earnings on that now. Okay, they go to another account, but the money just sits there and collects dust. Loses value here in relation to inflation. And here you can really see how simple it is, let's say, in the state. How budgeting is done, how things are managed here. Completely inefficient. I mean, no one in the private sector would do something like that. Just leaving so much money sitting in the account for several years. There's also a tendency for a default risk here. What happens if the euro crashes? If the euro crashes or whatever. There are a lot of really dangerous scenarios here. What happens if we see hyperinflation? Then in the end, the money here won't be worth anything. And you've got Bitcoin here, one of the coolest things out there, that you can't just print out of a money press. Did they trade that for a savings account where you basically have to stake your money for 3 years? Where you basically have your money frozen compulsively? 2, 3, 4 years, I don't know how long, until the money eventually loses all its purchasing power. And then you eventually figure it out. And then you realize, oh crap, now I might not be able to buy anything with that money. So that's really, really typical. And I get why Max Kaiser was so worked up about it yesterday. About the Bitcoin sales in Germany, and with 50,000. Bitcoin wasn't so bad in Germany either. They were somewhere among the top 5 nations or so. And now they're basically nowhere to be found. I mean, most of the people watching here on the YouTube channel, congrats to you, you have more Bitcoin than Germany. I think Germany doesn't have exactly 0 Bitcoin, but they have like 0.1, 0.01. Or some small amount of Bitcoin sitting there. But that's not a significant amount. Maybe it's a few thousand euros or something. But I just want to say congrats to most of the viewers here who have more Bitcoin now. As Olaf Scholz and his pros here with Germany. It's really crazy the kind of wild times we're living in. And then there are other countries like Bhutan, third world countries like El Salvador, that have bigger Bitcoin holdings than a major economic power or a former economic power. I don't know if there'll still be an economic power in the future, with decisions like that. Definitely not. And I'll say it again, everywhere here in El Salvador, maybe also to one or another of you when you go on vacation. When I go abroad, to Bitcoin meetups, the first question I always get is when I say, I'm from Germany, they say, what? Hey, Germany sold all their Bitcoin. Why did you all sell your Bitcoin? And then I can never answer, then I can just say, yes, because we are stupid. Or I don't know why, or we had to, well, some say, yeah, we had to because it was forced sales. But in my opinion, when you look at how often laws are bent here, they definitely could have intervened. Lindner is partly being criticized for that too, because now that he's acting all pro Bitcoin, he could have done that a few months ago when it was really an issue. He could have done that a few months ago, what it was all about here. Selling German Bitcoin, and now he's basically not here anymore. Finance minister, and now he's acting all pro Bitcoin. That's definitely a justified criticism here. But there are actually more exciting things happening here. That are happening here. For example, here in Russia, because now it says in the report. Russia is buying 10 million Bitcoin, well not 10 million Bitcoin, but 10 million US dollars into Bitcoin for their Bitcoin reserves. But we really need to pay close attention here. Because here, the original report was from Cointelegraph. Russia confiscates 10 million in Bitcoin, so they confiscated $10 million in Bitcoin here. And that was all some kind of criminal stuff and so on, kind of like in Germany. Those were all confiscated Bitcoins too. And now they're basically making a report out of that. So now Russia has 10 million US dollars more in Bitcoin reserve holdings, but we really need to differentiate here. I'm not entirely sure if this is going directly into the Bitcoin reserves. 200,000 Bitcoin are held separately in the USA. Trump aims to stockpile Bitcoin. They're not in the Bitcoin reserves yet either. They're just sitting in a separate account, where the confiscated coins are. And now Donald Trump wants to build up a Bitcoin stockpile here. So he wants to take the 200,000. Take Bitcoin. The 200,000. So he wants to convert Bitcoin into a Bitcoin reserve. And once that's converted into a Bitcoin reserve, they can't be sold off anymore. And what's happening here in Russia? That Bitcoin is basically being confiscated here. But the question here is whether this will be kept or if the same thing will happen as it did here in Germany. Will it be forcibly sold off then? Because in Germany, the reasoning was just that, yes, Bitcoin is way too volatile, and there are just fluctuations in volatility and stuff like that. I don't know if Russia is just as dumb here, because Putin has already talked about it. No one can stop Bitcoin. Putin has also basically, not Putin, but the finance minister of Russia has confirmed it. Hey, in Russia, they want to use Bitcoin for international settlements now. We want to use Bitcoin for international trade. It has already been confirmed, here from the finance minister, that this is definitely happening. And that's also what I said back then. If international trade really takes place here, then Russia really has to have significant Bitcoin holdings. So they need to have at least several million bitcoins here. Because if you're doing international trade in bitcoin here, then you can't just trade back and forth with 2 bitcoins or something like that. It's millions of dollars. Big transfers that are being made back and forth between different countries or something like that, but these are amounts in the millions. Big transfers that are being made back and forth between different countries. And you need at least, let's say, yes, at least 10, 100, or maybe even more than 100 million in bitcoin. And that's why it's really interesting now if Russia starts to increase their bitcoin holdings. Germany is selling. Germany can't do anything. With the money now we see that soon there will probably be a strategic Bitcoin reserve in the USA. And if it doesn't happen in the USA, then it will definitely happen in the States. Because right now, it definitely looks that way. There are now more and more states. This week, there are again. Did 2 states join in? Or 1, I can't even keep track anymore, because it seems like something keeps getting added all the time. There are states that are joining in. There are other states that, according to Dennis Porter, are still in the planning stages. That will also be joining. There are big politicians who are advocating for this. Not just in the US, because that's the interesting part. When something like this happens in the US, it has a huge impact. Then there's something like that in other countries too. Then other countries will join in. And then it really looks like Bitcoin is about to break through massively here. And then I found another really interesting observation in X. So, one person here says that first Saylor said he would advise Trump on Bitcoin if he were to ask him. So, Saylor was asked about this in an interview. And then Saylor had a conversation with Trump's son at Mar-a-Lago about Bitcoin. So here's a really interesting combination. Then the billionaire and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, starts following Saylor. So even more interesting. And the new Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is meeting with Cynthia Lummis. HA. And Cynthia Lummis is the biggest advocate for a Bitcoin strategy. She's even looking to sell gold, to buy Bitcoin with it. So really interesting connections. And now it gets even better. The new Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, is buying a stake in Tether. And Tether is the biggest on-ramp to Bitcoin. Even more interesting. And now we have Scott Bessent, who even admitted that he owns Bitcoin. 500 million is obviously just a small part of his portfolio, but he owns 500 million. Bitcoin. 500 million is obviously just a small part of his portfolio, but he owns 500 million. And now you just have to combine everything here, putting 1 and 1 together. Of course, you could also say, okay, it's all just random coincidence conspiracy theory. Blah, blah, blah. But if you ask me, there's a lot that suggests this is happening. That a strategic Bitcoin reserve is coming. Maybe not in the brutal way that a lot of people expect. But we really see new pieces of the puzzle every day. Now, the latest piece of the puzzle was the one with Scott Bassett, but even before that, already the meetings with Trump and the fact that Trump is now maybe more in touch with Michael Saylor. If not directly, then at least through Eric Trump. It even came out about Anthony Scaramucci, that Trump doesn't know much about Bitcoin, but that Eric Trump definitely has to be a Bitcoin maximalist. That Eric Trump really sees the big vision here. In the long run, it looks like the low time preference has. And all of this is basically just getting started. And then there's even the next piece of the puzzle that a lot of people are adding to. They say things like, okay, Michael Saylor has been making so many massive Bitcoin purchases all this time. He's basically front-running the strategic Bitcoin reserve. A lot of people throw that into the mix, but hold on, let me say, that's a bit far-fetched. You can't really say that yet, that this might be because of the Trump situation. Of course, people love to read into things. But definitely, connect the dots. Make your own conclusions. Feel free to write in the comments below if you also see the points coming together or if you think this is all just nonsense. If you want to buy Bitcoin, want to front-run Donald Trump and the USA, and not sell your Bitcoin like Germany does, then I'll put a link down below to 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. Here you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin with the code BitcoinHotel. I'm signing off here from El Salvador. Here you can see my cool bike, bought with Bitcoin by the way. I'm going to show you El Salvador now. And then I'll say goodbye. Until then, peace out.